David, you have been responsible for basically, I think, like at least 30% of the artists that we've spoken to on Sludge Underground. Please introduce yourself and what it is you do.
Marcel, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's long overdue, I admit. We've been talking about doing this, I think, years now. And to that end, yes, my name is David Oosthuizen. I have got a company called Devographic Music Agency. I really specialize in taking artists to market in all facets of the music business. That includes PR, it includes radio, it includes playlisting, but then really also the brand that is the band, because every band is a brand and every artist is a brand. It's really also cultivating that brand, honing the skill, getting that artist ready for a market whereby they can't just play their music, but have the ability to transcend and get their name out there, not just local, of course, international. So we're talking about across various sectors and various territories. So really, that means everything from getting an artist to be able to get his music on all different platforms, distribution. That means obviously also lobbying for an artist to be able to play a specific show. That also means building a brand and an artist's profile so that he is able to confidently, be recognized in a certain territory for acknowledgements, or be able to really kind of be in contention for certain accolades. Let's talk, for instance, charts, or being able to enter certain, competitions and SAMAs and all these kind of things. So really, it is a full house. I do pretty much everything that the music business would require, barring potentially being a label, really. So what I mean by that is it really also focuses on the independent artist primarily.
That's incredible. Like the amount of work that you've put into this. How long have you actually been doing what it is that you do?
Gosh, Marcel, again, that is such a multi-pronged answer, because like everything, you kind of go back in history, and it's an interesting journey that I've had, because I myself started playing in bands very, sort of just out of school, I imagine, sort of 90, I'm giving my age away, yeah, now 95, 96. I was, enjoying being an artist and playing in bands. It was, early days in Pretoria, where I was studying at University of Pretoria. I was busy studying photography and I was busy studying design, and of course enjoying being a muso myself. And then subsequently out of that, got offered a opportunity once I finished my degrees to kind of go into the music business quite unplanned. I found myself working for Nokia back in the day, which we did digital music. So it was ringtones and logos, if you remember those little catalogs where you text, you know, to a certain keyword to a certain number, and you would get, by SMS reply, you would get a ringtone. And of course, that was digital music, but that was way before the era of digital streaming, because back then it was content that we curated, and the artist got their cut in terms of a license agreement for digital distribution for music in terms of ringtones. And that kind of saw me spend a good 7, 8 years in the music business, selling music on digital platforms to mobile phones before streaming. So when streaming really kind of broke, and the iTunes of this world took everybody out on account of global agreements and just undercutting everybody in terms of prices. And of course, you had to have an iTunes to be able to get the music on your phone. So you couldn't get it from a third party anymore like we used to do. Then I decided, it's time to move on. And I then decided to go and take my network and my connections that I've made over those era and hone it to kind of enable brands and bands to benefit from sort of that era of networking. And now by that I mean I used to literally take photos, which is where my photography side of things come in. In videography, I used to take photos and we would load them, of course, to have wallpapers for mobile phones. So I would take photos of artists and bands playing and we would load it onto the system and people could download these for their phone. And that's how I got into the kind of photography side of music. And of course, licensing music from labels and artists is how I really cut my teeth in meeting all the people in the industry, and of course working with radio stations and international content houses and labels, and all these guys is what I then decided to use as learning and put it into a package that became me as an individual, empowering, like I said, artists for no matter what they might need out of that collection of services that I offer.
That is one hell of a skill set. And you just brought so many memories back about the sending a message to get a ringtone. Like I
Yeah.
I was like a lighty. I was probably anywhere between 7 to about 12 when when that was a thing. And it was actually such a short space of time. It's how quickly everything escalated to where it is now, how quickly it developed and evolved. And it must have been one hell of an industry to work in at that time.
It was exciting. That was really, I dare say, to a degree, the only time that I think digital as a content offering really benefited the artist, because at that time, honestly, the percentage ratios was so healthy in favor of the artists as well as the producers and the labels. Everybody got a really good share. And the market was at that point in time so hungry, and downloads were really happening. But people were, of course, were still buying CD. So it wasn't cannibalizing one medium. It was really adding value to that medium. People were still going to shows. So it was also, in fact, adding, another content layer and another revenue stream for artists. And it was a healthy revenue stream because it was not at that point laying the foundation of what today becomes almost the expectation that music is a commodity that's free. And, it is sort of your given right to get it free. People still understood that you have to pay. And, it was a medium where people would happily send a 10 Rand or a 20 Rand SMS to get a full track or a ringtone of euphonic, triphonic, all the different types we had. And of course, it was, as a single track download, no different to what you would sort of pay as a digital download. And it's just people didn't sort of see it that way because it was personalizing their phone, which is something quite personal to you. It was adding value to their phone, and it was the first time you could customize your phone. And of course, you wouldn't want the latest ringtone or the, dare say, the A-Team theme song or the Thundercats theme song, if that was what you're into. And of course, it escalated, as you said, rightfully so quickly that the industry grasped at this and ran with it to the tune where, if I recall back in 2003, 4, the Crazy Frog that came out, those theme songs were almost written for mobile and transcended almost as the first ever viral campaigns to go out in their millions across the world to mobile phones. And the artists really benefited healthily. It's unfortunately when the kind of digital streaming services came to be that sort of made everything almost as a playing field free, where, the diminishing started of, artists struggling with other revenue streams where your physical distribution medium no longer bringing the bulk of the cash.
No, that definitely makes sense. Like I never looked at it that way. I think I was too young to understand that that was a way that artists were making money. I don't think I ever considered that there were people writing those ringtones. I don't think it ever crossed my mind until you brought it up now, until you actually spoke about it. Like, no, it makes complete sense now to hear you say it. But I never at that time, and I'm pretty sure this counts for so many other people, that there was actually people creating that. There were actually artists creating those ringtones, that music, that stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we were supporting those artists in droves, because there was also platforms that started to emerge. Who can forget Mixit? Who can forget the Vodacom for Me portals and the empty and loaded portals and the Cell C Juice portals? And later years, even brands came on board, let's say, like KFC with their sound bites. And there was a really fantastic platform where youngsters, I mean, I recall people on a daily basis submitting music to me at Exact Mobile, where they were asking me to please put it and consider it as either on the portal or in their booklet, or alternatively at a live event. To the tune at one point we were launching music before it was actually available in your local Musica or Look and Listen. A week to 2 weeks before the time, we would actually exclusively launch it as a ringtone. And we would have hundreds of thousands of downloads of these ringtones 2 weeks, 3 weeks before the song launched. To the point at one point, major labels were coming to us and launching major artists 2, 3 weeks before it went on to sale in the physical copy in Musica. And like I said, that was a fantastic bleeding edge innovation era, 2000 to 2007, 2008, until the Apples and the iTunes and all these Napsters and all these guys really kind of became the next wave, and you could never hold that wave back because it was only inevitable that at some point in time that would become the next wave. And of course, like everything, artists at that point had to start adapt, and like I said, that's when I changed and honed my offering and craft to move more into a space whereby artists still have the opportunity to garner revenue and to still promote themselves in an ever-changing world, because of course then social media came to be, because that's also when the Facebooks and band camps and God knows all these kind of platforms just really started getting traction. I mean, we'll forget MySpace back then, which was sort of the first kind of offering in that era, and that changed the rule book completely again. But anyway, I've sort of changed with the times, and every time there's been a major paradigm shift in the industry like this, we've adapted. So today, like I said, I work in getting people onto big Spotify playlists, because that's one of the big things you got to do these days, and get those numbers up and get the followers and the streams up, and of course radio play, because we're also not talking about an industry today that is online. So there are so many online radio stations that are fantastic, that often I dare say can compete at any time with an AM FM. That empowers sort of anybody to kind of curate content and get it out there. And all of this is channeled. That's what's important. Brands and bands need to see this all as channel, but they need to be able to traverse this massive sea of expansion. And every day there's a new challenge, and every day there's a new platform. And it's artists need to be able to focus on what they do great, which is create fantastic music, be creative, have an artistic vision, give life to this vision, be able to then create it, produce it, mix it, master it, and then come to somebody like me and say, Devo, I have this beautiful piece of music, let's give it wings. And that's where I save artists a sea of frustration and hard learnings and school fees that I've learned over many, many years. And they get the benefit of kind of traversing this minefield, which is the music industry today, in a way with confidence that, their music is going to get heard. It's going to get the best possible opportunity to be heard by the right people. Because again, like everything in life, it's not necessarily what you know, it's who you know. And it's your delivery. It's the fine details. The devil is always in the detail.
I love that you've adapted so well with the times. Like I would never have guessed that that is where you've come from. That's where where you started off with it versus where you are now. Because like I see what you do for so many artists, and everything is always so well executed that like I would most people struggle to adjust with the times. Most people struggle to get on board, especially when things change so like violently and quickly. Because like streaming services and stuff, that was in the space of a decade, basically, that it that took over entirely.
Yes, I mean, they're basically like a mist before the sun. It almost decreed that the good 100 years plus that we've known to be formats is over overnight, literally. And it's forced everybody to go back to the drawing board and adapt. And it will happen again. That's the one thing that I've learned over many years. And that's not just music, it's the technology sphere, because by default, you got to be adverse to what's happening in social and tech, and I also work in websites, because having a great website and having an app and a mobile app, and these things are all, it's all facets, it's all tools that you've got to master. But again, that's what I do so that I can really forward that benefit to an artist. And it'll change, it'll rapidly change. Who knows what's coming next? But one thing that you can be sure, as I always say, change is inevitable. But yes, it was a significant paradigm shift because, of course, for a good 100-year period, artists were making money from physical medium. Whether it be the vinyl or the 8-track or a tape, CD, cassette, even DVD. I mean, let's look how fast DVD has dwindled now. So, even your music being available on a DVD is, who's got a DVD player these days anymore? Who's got a CD player in their car? Who's got a CD player or a CD-ROM in their laptop? Nobody. We're in a world now where music is completely in tactile. It lives in the cloud. And, the only way that you can still really add massive value and when artists can put the benefit of their craft is, of course, in live shows, which is why live shows and finding creative ways for you to market your brand, not just in terms of playing live, but all other kinds of things. We're talking about the advent of some of these creative new formats that are coming out now that sees artists, trying things like NFTs or whatever, and that's not to say that's the next wave, but the next wave is always coming and it's just about being prepared. But what's very important, an artist must never lose sight on the fact that they are a content producer that has got something the world wants. I mean, look at COVID, 2 years of COVID, 2 years plus of COVID. The one thing I dare say is I don't think the world would ever look at artists in a different way, because for those years that people were sitting at home with nothing to do, they were listening to music, they were watching movies, and creative people were sort of the soundtrack to the apocalypse. It was getting people through their day to day. It was giving them hope, inspiration, and it's exactly like Dave Grohl says, when somebody sings a song back at him, he loves it because, when he sings a song to a 45,000 strong audience, each person sings it back for a different reason, a purpose. It's their first date. It's a memory of their first, matric dance, and everybody has a different connection emotionally to music. And it's those experiences and those stories that really I tell and help artists. And thank you for that compliment, by the way, about execution, because that is the crux of everything. It's about executing a campaign well, from the look and feel to the tonality to how we position the music, when we do it, time-wise is important, how we position the artist to which territories, what we give people in terms of an early release or a pre-save down to the day that it gets released, and then, post-fact. All those things, there's so much detail to consider that it is a multifaceted multimedia 360 campaign, and that's why I said I've been able to put my photography skills, my videography skills, my history and business and music down to social media, and then of course the acumen that you need in terms of just the administration and the management of it is really kind of what under one umbrella Devographic offers.
Like, I'm actually blown away just at how well you communicate your overall vision and the mission of what you do. Like, I'm the resident scatterbrain of Sludge Underground. I'm not gonna lie, you've experienced this. I apologize, like in person for this. And like it absolutely fascinates me and how well you keep everything together. Because David, how many artists do you currently manage?
Marcel, that's hard to say, because obviously I work with artists in different facets. Some artists I have been with me for years, so we've walked a long road together from early days to no, and it's a constant evolution because you can never stand still. But of course, many artists come to me for short-term campaigns. Some come to me for various facets of their business and requirements. So at any given time, it's hard to say. It depends on the seasonality as well. Of course, the industry is no different to everything else. There's certain times of the year where there's a lot more releases. Some of the times of the year it quiets down a bit. But it really depends. But several that are with me permanently, and those are very, very strong long-term relationships. where, I believe we will probably work together another how many years until that artist is getting the recognition he deserves and have broken certain milestones that we've set for ourselves and evolved to a point where we get where we want to be. So I can't give you specific numbers, of course, but it's a lot, But yes, it does mean I juggle many balls, and it does mean I have to have a very healthy amount of project management and time management, and being able to keep my head in many different spheres at every given moment.
I think in your shoes, I would lose my head entirely. Like I'm gonna like I sometimes barely manage to manage my own person, and I find I'm envious of that. I find that like absolutely amazing.
Well, like I think, again, looking back at my early days, when I was running, like say an exact mobile, it was a corporate trial by fire because it was for me, you had to be very, very, very meticulous and very formulated and structured and you've got to have your head about you, and that's just the discipline I think that I've also learned early on when, like I said to you, I studied at University of Pretoria. I was fortunate enough to go and study design and photography, and later on I went and studied information science and even IT. And it's a vast array of experiences and skills, but also coupled with a personality. And I'm an absolute perfectionist, which, as you know, people will always say on one hand it's a blessing, on the other hand it's a curse. But in this space, to be structured, meticulous, and a perfectionist is what's needed. Because it's often, and Marcel, what you mentioned is it's a personality thing. Creatives are often and 90% of the times thinking about their next song, that next idea, the hook, their show, how are we structuring the next set list? What are we going to do with this next verse? What are the lyrics and the choruses? And that's what an artist needs to do. So the moment you start laboring an artist with, dare I say, even though left and right brain thinking is not exactly quite a biological neuroscientific fact, but yes, let's for argument's sake say left and right brain thinkers, it is the opposite. So a creative person needs to be able to stay creative, and to them this is almost to a degree of frustration. The business side of things is what bogs them down. They want to be able to be creative and not sit and worry about the things that I bring to the table, and that is why we add so much value to each other. Just like I'm not the creative, I'm not the person writing the music, but I'm certainly the one to take it to market. And that's why we complete each other. So as a left and a right, yin and a yang. And, together, especially like I said, some of the artists that I've worked with for so long, it's just we're a team, I can't go without them. They can't go without me.
That was a great way. That made me feel a lot better about myself. Thank you. I appreciate that. That was that made me
It takes
feel.
all types to make the world go round. So absolutely. And again, I just want to thank you for that compliment. I appreciate, all the compliments. It's really well noted. Thank you.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure like working with like so many of the artists that we've spoken to and that have been brought forward by you. And every one of them has spoken incredibly highly of you. Like there's never been a single complaint. I don't think anyone would ever do it on record, but nothing has ever seemed short of genuine in terms of how the artists that have, especially the ones that have come to us from you.
Yeah, look, I mean, authenticity is everything, in this game. This game is won on quality and quantity, but also authenticity. It's when you approach somebody, you need to be authentic. And I think that's the one thing I always look in for the artists that contact me, because that's a question I've had several times. And people always say, what do I look in at an artist? Who do I want to work with? And for me, integrity and honesty is obviously foremost important, and just a well-rounded, just be authentic and be honest about what it is you do, because that will translate in your music. It will translate in your brand, your personality. And from a marketing perspective, there's so much I can do to promote an artist. But if he doesn't believe in himself, or if an artist is, like absolutely withdrawn or potentially not interested in to be successful. That's, I think, often some of the artists' downfall is they don't necessarily either believe that they can be successful, or alternatively they just shoot themselves in the foot and do everything that I don't tell them to do. But it is so rare. I always look for these artists that have got a bright future and are authentic, and so that we can work well together, so that that exactly is the experience that you as a media person have, because that is what we aim for, is to be absolutely professional. There's no better compliment I can always get from somebody like yourself that says that, we were so blown away by the professionalism of your offering and your submissions and your artists, because that translates international. That's why we've had so much compliments and success international as well, because even though we're from South Africa, often people believe that for some reason the quality will be less, which is rubbish. I believe firmly that the quality that comes out of South Africa is so phenomenal, and the artists are so amazing. And I've only had feedback international to corroborate that it's an absolute blessing, and it's proud to be a South African. There's so many guys that say when they hear that we're from South Africa, they look forward to hearing the music already, because we've set a precedent. And that's why, you hear about the African music revival, and I couldn't be happier and prouder.
It's funny that you say that though, regarding about the standard of South African music, because I was talking to Wade Flowerday the other day, and he said the other thing is like, why do we keep saying international standard, where it gives this perception that South African music is lower, where it's not, and it's a perception that needs to change.
Exactly. I think often, exactly, because we exceed world standards. Often look at South Africa. We are a country, we are a culture that knows how to knock a door in when there's not, to go and create an opportunity when there might not always be one. So we are very tenacious. I mean, look at the operating conditions all of us as a nation live in under day. We're talking, you and I are sitting in darkness right now. I mean, we are having a full-fledged conversation in two cities in the dark with no power, limited connectivity. But you know what? That doesn't make us go cry and moan. We're doing this and we are operating, and it's not stopping us. And if anything, it makes us more tenacious. It makes us more hungry. It makes us more operation ready, and international people are blown away by that, because often, the sentiment otherwise international be like, oh, we got so many problems, we can't do this. My experience is just the opposite. South Africans pull up their sleeves and we just go and make this shit happen. I'm sorry. It's like, and that's why I fully agree. If anything, we are on such a world-class standard. And I say it proudly, because, like I said, when the radio stations and the people I speak to international and the media houses, they have only got compliments for us. And it's something to be proud of, to be a South African artist, because, they often get submissions to the tune of a few hundred a week, all from the same genre, all from the same era, all from the same town, all from the same city, all from the same country. And here we come along and we submit something that's not only on par or often exceeds that standard. And here we come from South Africa. It's exciting and it's proud. And that's the first thing I always looking for an artist as well, is to be fiercely, proudly South African. Don't go and woe is me, I'm in South Africa, we under substandard. Not at all.
I have this running joke that South Africans, like the bar of South African music is so high is because we have to do everything on hard mode. You have to do everything on the absolute most difficult difficulty to get anywhere, to do anything, to achieve anything.
That's tenacious and it makes us hungry, and we do the legwork. And yes, not everybody gets the same level of results. But this is again why somebody like me is there. I've got the networks, I've got the relationships. I've fought so many fights and battles in the past to, like I said, open those doors that weren't any. That's the benefit. That's why we complete each other. So, and that's why I say there's absolutely no need to ever be despondent. Yes, we've got challenges, of course, like everybody. We can use more venues. There's lots more we could do, and that's a work in progress. But to ever say that we are in any ways substandard to anybody is absolutely rubbish. I'm an absolute advocate and ambassador for Proudly South African in that regard. And that's across the board. Marcel, that is no matter if it's pop, rock, Kwaito, hip hop. I mean, we are ambassadors in the international community for certain styles of music. We were celebrated at Canadian Music Week a few years ago, where they literally dedicated an entire week to South African African music. It is the beginning of a revival.
I didn't even know about that. That actually that blows my mind. What like I wanted to ask you is speaking about, lack of venues and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on, what seems to be a resurgence in the South African music scene now that COVID is the restrictions have eased up. It seems like things are going back to normal. What are your thoughts on the scene kicking back into gear?
Well, look, there's no lack of people trying, as always. There's a show, multiple shows per night in different parts of the world. I mean, obviously, COVID created carnage and havoc in the scene in terms of music venues. But like everything, it will recover. But of course, people, I think if anything, people need to remember those days where they couldn't wait to go back to a live show, as opposed to being inundated with so much choice that it becomes a complacent situation whereby people don't show up. So, of course, there's a lot that you can do to support. And that's why it's always important that people go and support. And, like you were saying, there's a recurring that meme that says, give your local band a listen. He may well be as good as any of the bands you've heard. That is so true. But that said, I mean, I think, the loss of venues have been devastating, but that's been across the board. And I think, of course, yeah, I mean, the entertainment industry took a heavy hit, but slowly but surely, I think things will come right. And, but yes, we could always do with more venues and, I suppose more choice. But again, never let that be the glass half empty. Let that to be the glass half full. So I'm sure there's a new generation of people that will take up that baton soon. And we'll see some more venues and some of the old guys that were potentially, closed shop may potentially open again. But Marcel, overall, it's always something to look forward to improving, and for everybody to help and do their bit to improve, not just to sit back and have one or two people do the work.
Like I wanted to clarify something. Now, you do photography as well. Were you one of the people who managed to get a photograph of the Iron Maiden plane when it came into South Africa?
That was an interesting story because, yes, I've been a music photographer for quite some time and have been fortunate enough to photograph and interview a lot of bands as a journalist as well. And yes, so I've been fortunate enough to get accreditation for when Iron Maiden came to South Africa. And the story is as follows. I did the Cape Town show, and just before the show started, Iron Maiden had the most amazing press room. It was called the Trooper Room. And like everything Iron Maiden does, it was super professional. So all the media and photographers and all the press people were brought into the Trooper Room. Of course, there were Trooper Ale, and everything was just made in typical Maiden fashion to the hilt. And of course, their Phantom Media manager, Dave Shack, was there. And I said to Dave, I need to chat to Bruce about Iron Maiden never done an air-to-air photograph of Air Force One. You always just see it from the ground. And he said, no, mate, no problem. We'll have a chat. And of course, I went and photographed Iron Maiden, blew my mind, one of my favorite bands of all time. And then afterwards, Dave's like, Bruce is interested to hear what you've got to say about the air-to-air photography. So a little bit of history about myself. I had a father that was a fighter pilot and grew up in Waterkloof Air Force Base, essentially in Pretoria. And I'm also part of Canon South Africa. I'm the Canon ambassador for music photography. And Roger Mashin, who is head of Canon South Africa, is also, of course, a major aviation enthusiast with himself, a long history in aviation and aircraft photography. And another one of the very big Canon ambassadors is a guy called Justin de Rieck, who is a phenomenal aviation photographer. And so, armed with all these people, I got to chat to Iron Maiden afterwards, and Bruce Dickinson said to me that I believe you said you can do an air-to-air photography of our plane. And it's never happened before because there's several factors to consider, like, timing. It usually takes weeks to plan these things. And of course, you don't do an air-to-air photography of a plane full of people, because this had not only the band, but Live Nations people, and you also have 6 tons of equipment on board. The plane is fully loaded with fuel. It's a charter plane from Air Atlantic in America. You also being in Cape Town, we would have had to photograph this, doing rounds around Lion's Head, which of course you go over, military Air Force space, etc. But yes, I said to Bruce, look, I know enough people that I believe if we have good weather, because this was the Wednesday that Iron Maiden played in Cape Town, and they were leaving to go to Johannesburg the Friday afternoon. And it only gave us 2 days. But I said to him, I believe I know enough of the right people to, if you give me the go ahead that you guys would be willing to do this, I would be able to pull this off. I think everybody was extremely skeptical. But when Bruce and Iron Maiden said yes, we would not only be interested, but if you can pull it off, it would be the first. I set out and I literally made half a dozen phone calls, literally backstage in the trooper room after the show. And we subsequently went with the band to their hotel and we started talking about what the potential flight plans and paths would look like. And yes, subsequently throughout the night, people phoned me back and everything fell into place. So much so that the Friday morning, we, amassed a absolute ace team of photographers, including Roger from Canon and Justin Deriek, which is, as I said, one of the best aviation photographers out there, with myself in tow. And long story short, after people thought that Air Force One was hijacked because it was doing these unplanned circles around, Robben Island, and everybody was watching this plane on radio monitor. They were looking at the plane doing these odd circles and keep circling and circling. But of course, what was happening is that the air-to-air photography was taking place. And pretty much, we were sworn to secrecy until we could confirm that the photo was not just to their liking, but that they were happy to announce it to the world. That only came about 3 weeks later. And it was the worst kept secret of all, because everybody was sort of wondering, where did we all disappear and where did Roger disappear and Justin and everybody, myself and everybody, what's going on? And then 3 weeks later, Maiden broke not only the story, of course, on their main page, and then this photo that it just broke the internet, literally, because, of course, that most iconic photo of Air Force One against Table Mountain. We've had photos from everybody like the South African tourism and people just saying that it's become such a iconic photo, not only, to sort of the outside world to show Cape Town, but to the band themselves, it has become an absolute iconic photo for them, because it is just such a great shot of Air Force One.
That is so cool. Like, I've just been sitting here smiling the whole way through the story. That is mind blowing. How does it feel to like know that you were essentially the person behind this even happening?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, so much so that, months afterwards, Phantom Media, the business that runs Iron Maiden, and Bruce himself. Of course, Bruce is an absolute. We were talking about it earlier, right? Knowing what it means to be a brand. So Bruce is not only the man, obviously the front man, but he's got degrees in marketing and he's a Olympic fencer. He's himself a cancer survivor, and the story goes on and on. He knows what it means to be a figurehead and a management party and of course a aviation enthusiast and a musician. But to them, we had such great feedback from them, the band, months afterwards. Sadly, my father passed away from cancer not long after that, to the tune that Bruce Dickinson himself signed a copy of that photo and sent it over to my father with a very beautiful inscription, to give him motivation to hang in there for his cancer fight. That's how much that photo has meant, not only to me, but obviously to the band as well. It's become this iconic photo. And to this day, it's even hanging in Air Atlantic's offices and in the Maiden offices. And obviously Justin Derrick, the legend. And it's been in those magazines. It had engagement to the tunes of millions. That blew up so over the internet that, again, those 3 weeks that we were just kind of not able to mention what happened. How awesome that was. And of course, then everybody that was in Johannesburg waiting for the plane to arrive, wondering why they were almost an hour and a half late. Then they were like, oh, now we understood what happened, because we couldn't understand why Iron Maiden would decide to, circle around Robben Island for an hour and a half on a pure 2 hour flight from Joburg to Cape Town. Oh, sorry, the reverse, Cape Town to Joburg. And you know, so then all of that kind of demystified, but it's just one of the examples of a great story of where everything just fell in place, and I'm glad you brought it up. It's a great story and it's a great memory.
I think it was Matthew Howes, my band's vocalist, who told me the story, and I wanted to bring it up because I grew up listening to Maiden because of my dad. Like I can't wait to tell him the story. I'm not sure how much of it he actually knows because he himself is a massive Maiden enthusiast. So I can't wait to share that with him.
No, it's a great story. I mean, we yeah, to this day, I when I look at that photo, the memories. And interestingly enough, I took a very nice photo of Bruce doing a pretty high jump over the monitors. It's one of his signature moves, and he generally does it in the first song. And that itself also made it into an article from them where they dubbed that Ed Force 2 and they put it next to the Ed Force 1 plane. And then, of course, the whole story and the whole sort of trip that memorized it for them coming to South Africa. So I think that was also very special for them, to come to South Africa and then have something like this happen. Because, like I said, generally doing a head-to-head photographing it's very hard to do. But there were just so many great people that just was dead set to make it happen.
Yeah, it was just
From
meant to happen. Like
it
it's
was for 2 days there was a team of probably 20 people, including Bruce, because Bruce was just on his side on the plane, sort of, justifying back to Air Atlantic and those guys who owned the plane, because of course they lease this thing. It's not their plane; they lease it. It gets decaled and furbished specifically for their purpose on lease. And they were very, very excited for this to happen. And they themselves were also saying, listen, we will obviously make this happen in the best and absolute safest environment. And I can't stress, it was every single facet of safety was followed, um, down to the T. So there was no corners cut. It's just that there was a small army of people that were all dedicated to make it happen, which made everything just fit in place. So much so that the only thing that came out the Friday morning that could have ruined all of it was the weather. If there wasn't absolute perfect visibility and beautiful, everything clear. So everybody kind of woke up the Friday morning and sort of slowly pulled the curtain out to see what the weather looks like. Because of course, everybody that lives in Cape Town knows if you pull back that curtain in the morning and visibility is poor and there's wind, there's no go. That's just going to shut you down
yeah,
in your
the whole
tracks.
day
And
is buggered.
that's it. And I'll never forget pulling the curtain slowly back, and this beautiful ray of sunlight just coming over the ocean hits me straight in the eye. And it's like this wind still, 100% visibility, perfect day. And the WhatsApp group that we had between Maiden, ourselves, and all the people just exploded. Everybody was just, this is happening. It's happening. And, magic and history is about to be made.
That's probably one of the most wholesome stories I've ever heard. Like that is probably like the most impactful story I've had told to me on this whole show. Like I'm literally like fangirling at this point. Like
And
that
of
is so
course,
cool.
myself included, I've been a journalist for many, many years. I've been privileged to speak to the bands that I've loved and many bands. And even myself, it's like you get used to speaking to bands and those things, but when it came to Maiden, I had to keep pinching myself that this is real. I'll never forget sitting in the Table Bay Hotel there, and just across the road from me is Bruce, and there's Steve Harris, and Here's this band that I remember growing up, and it's just, it's beyond just a band. It's a lifestyle. It's the aspirational side of it. And I've had to kind of draw a parallel. Something that was always stuck with me as well, that Bruce said, is that the realization of a band that your live persona needs to be aspirational, that people would literally sell, their soul to get a ticket to your show, is what is going to make artists survive the next generation. And that ties nicely, wholesomely back to what we said earlier in our conversation, is that is why the Rammsteins of this world, no matter what they charge per ticket prices, people are going to pay it, because it's the spectacle of this fantastic pyrotechnic explosion. It's Maiden with their planes flying out at you, and Eddie out in the back, blowing flames. And, that is what the entertainment value is. And that is what artists need to understand, that the only way they're going to make money in the future is by a fantastic live performance. People need to want to flock to pay to see. Look what's happening with Blink 182. They've announced their reunion show. Sad thing, of course, is that there's a fair amount of sort of, punting and scalping happening already, which is what's in the industry now trying to, regulate. But, Maiden is a good example of one of those bands like Rammstein. The reason why Alice Cooper is still around and the Kisses of this world, it's the back to good old entertainment value. People want to be entertained. They want to be taken away from their daily lives into a different sphere, and they want to be rocked, and they want to be rolled, they want to be entertained.
Like it's more it's about the, like you said, it's the entertainment, the value, the being taken to a different space, whether it just be for an hour or two, to forget about the mundane
Yeah.
side of life, to forget about the
And of course,
monotonous.
that coincides with merchandising. The the very pricey T-shirt, the very pricey, merchandise. But you know what? It's the memory. You've got that piece of that evening to memorize it. I mean, myself, I've got concert T-shirts that I've held on to from many, many years, and it's not so much the T-shirt. The T-shirt's just another piece of fabric, but it's the memory of that live show, or it's the I went with that friends of mine to this show, or can you remember when we saw Metallica here? That shirt becomes like a active memory, and that's why people don't worry spending money on those kind of things, because that is it's memento, it's memorized, and that's where there's opportunity for revenue always. But you got to become an aspirational band. You got to have that factor where people want to import money, because disposable income is at an all-time low, so you are competing with people and their day-to-day living, and that's what it brings.
I couldn't agree more, honestly. Like the memories attached to things, the sentimental value attached to things, sometimes is significantly more valuable than the thing itself, at least.
Absolutely. I mean, let's put it in perspective. Let's do a test. Would you pay 600 rand for a t-shirt? It may well say Metallica, but it's from a whatever, a little outlet. Even let's dare say the internet. You would probably question, you would probably find five reasons why it's a bit pricey. Of course, I've got to still import it. There's, of course, South Africa's heavy import taxes on these things. But you know what? At the show that evening, you with your mates, you're seeing one of your favorite bands. It's almost like 600 rand for a t-shirt. That it's almost like that impulse buy. It's sort of the spontaneity with it, and then the memory of it. It's literally the smell of that shirt. It's the same reason people love vinyl still. It's the tactile factor. It's the looking at the art. It's looking and reading the lyrics. It's the tactile feeling part of it. That's what we've lost with digital music. And that's why I believe there's this resurgence in vinyl, because not only is there an entire generation that never had vinyl, so to them, the youngsters of today, it's a new thing for them. They never had it. And then, of course, it's a nostalgic thing for people like myself that always used to have it and now have it again. And then for everybody else, it's the ability to still have something that you can hold to that is different. You can still get it digital, sure, but you can hold it, you can see it. Same as the t-shirts, and that is why I said bands today, it's all about playing live. That's why concerts today, lineups look like monsters of rock from 1980. If you look at some of the big festivals of today, all these bands had to come back out of retirement because, of course, their distribution money is dried up. They're not selling product anymore. So now they've realized that, we got to go back on road. That's why you see the Motley Crues and the Def Leppards and the Journeys and the Foreigners and the Scorpions and all these legendary bands, touring almost more than they have ever in the period of the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s sometimes, because in those days they had a lot of other revenues to sustain them. Where today, they have to be on the road to make money. And of course, people still want to see it because for those people that know these bands, let's talk about Maiden again. You grew up with them, but there's also a new generation of people experiencing and seeing them for the first time now.
I wasn't even aware that like some of these guys had come back, to be honest. Like I wasn't aware that some of these guys were back on the road and whatnot. And I find it interesting that the way that you phrased it, that there's people seeing it for the first time where it's something new to them. I grew up like I was born in the 90s and records were pretty much already dead by that point. I myself own a record player now that because I really wanted that and I really liked the idea of having that physical collection. The way that you phrase it is also something that I've never looked at. It's new to a generation that didn't grow up with it.
I can't remember when exactly the article was, but I had a very interesting interview. I think it was about 2012 or 2013. I spoke to Eric Peterson from Testament, who said to me something so interesting. He said to me that, that we were asked by a young generation that we want vinyl because, this new format is so awesome. So are you guys going to be doing all this new stuff? And it was so interesting to hear that because, of course, they refer to it as new, but it's not new. It was when vinyl just started sort of, bringing up its getting its resurgence. And that's what I mean by that. It's almost like bands were being asked to, can you bring out this new format? Well, that's not new. It's new to you because you didn't experience it before. And like I said, and to those people like myself that always used to have it, it's a great return to the old. But that's just again shows as an example that people will never actually kind of completely get rid of something tactile. But yes, it's minimal, and it's becoming almost an audio file format, because it's so expensive. But bands are learning how to put extra tracks on there and make it a limited edition. And of course, it's colored vinyl and it's signed and it's autographed. And all these things add tremendous value for those guys that want to really have a very specific collector's item. So it's almost becoming to that degree a specialist format. It'll never be mass market. It's too expensive to be mass market. But it's certainly another example of where people are starting to really explore that kind of medium almost in a new way.
I'm stoked about it. I'm really glad that it is making a comeback. David, in closing, like I've had so much fun with this chat. I've learned so much, and it's been an absolute pleasure to finally get to speak to you. Uh, Usually what we do is we would usually close out with a song from an artist. But now, is there any particular track that you would want to close this episode out with from one of the artists that you manage?
That is such an interesting question because, again, like I said, I work with so many people that I'd almost love to give you a playlist. So, how about I make you a playlist? I'll create a Spotify playlist with tracks from some of the contemporary artists and some of the things I work with. And instead of a song, but I suppose you need to play a song, right? So you need to play
That's
out with the
actually
song.
so that's actually not a bad idea. What I will do is I'll use a snippet from the song that you choose, and then in the description of the episode, I'm pretty sure we can add a link to that playlist from there.
Yes, I'll make you a very nice Spotify playlist that you can refer people to. My lights have just come on, so I'm very happy.
Oh, fantastic. The timing is perfect.
Perfect, indeed.
David, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this chat. I hope you have a fantastic evening further.
Likewise, Marcel. Speak soon and have a great evening and good weekend further.
the amount of work that you've put into this. How long have you actually been doing what it is that you do?
I was, enjoying being an artist and playing in bands. It was, early days in Pretoria where I was studying at University of Pretoria. I was busy studying photography and I was busy studying design and, of course, enjoying being a muso myself. And then subsequently out of that, got offered a opportunity once I finished my degrees to kind of go into the music business quite unplanned. I found myself working for Nokia back in the day, which